are healthy forests, and we need to make sure that our forests stay healthy, because when they burn, they're probably the number two generator of carbon into our atmosphere. And so healthy forests through thinning and through forest management, we can sequester much more carbon than we generate. In fact, most people don't realize, but the healthy Pacific forests sequester about 25% of the carbon the United States generates. So we can all be proud of the fact that we're actually living in a place that's sequestering more carbon than we're producing. And as the Vice Chair of Ag, I'm in a strong position to advocate for good, solid forest management. And you're seeing that on the Forest Service now, they're moving forward with thinning. Forests don't burn, and the state is working with responsible forest management, so our forests don't burn. The other thing too is when we bring that wood to market and it's put into a product like cross-laminated timber and other mass timber building materials, that carbon is sequestered forever. And a younger tree can take its place to begin to sequester carbon. The trees that are left behind, as they continue to grow, will sequester more carbon. I'm actually a fan, and the timber companies want to work with the legislature along with the environmental groups to come up with a plan so that we can get credit and recognition for the healthy forests we have.
Thank you. Next question, please. And I will say, if we don't get to everyone's questions, you can be first up for the next round. So how's that sound? Go ahead, please.
I'm Chris Llewellyn. I'm an organic farm in Quilcene. I am a big proponent of rural economies, and the organic farming has grown exponentially in our area and could be the solution to the grid. About this says if everyone went biodynamic organic, we could eliminate greenhouse gases. It's the conventional farming that helps put it out. So I want to know how we can balance a growing population. We need to feed our population. Right now in Jefferson County, people only buy about 4% of their food here, and we have the capacity to grow almost all of it. I mean, we can grow melons, we can grow grapes, we can grow just about anything you want in Jefferson County. So I'm saying, let this district be different. Let us be innovative and be an example for the nation in creative housing and preserving our farmland, our forest lands, our pristine waterways that aren't so pristine right now. And I want to know what innovative things that you are going to put forward to help us in this unique area.
A couple of things, Chris. Really proud of the fact that when I was a county commissioner for 16 years, Clallam County, that policy of no spray on Clallam properties. And disappointed as soon as I left the Board of Commissioners overturned that rule. No spray along county road. We saw in Clallam County, and that spraying of the county roadways can work its way into the ecosystem through the water. We saw you potentially see bee pollination drop off as bee colonies collapse. So for organic farming, for someone who's doing it the right way, your local government, we shouldn't be spraying poisons onto our landscape. Number two, a couple of things that we worked on in the legislature, and a bill that I would love to see move forward, but there seems to be some resistance, which when I tell you what the bill is about, you're all going to wonder, like, who's resisting this? So most of the food we buy, most of the vegetables we buy in the grocery store, I have found out in my time in the legislature, is most of it is fertilized with composted human waste. And so we started to, we looked at a bill so that food would be labeled fertilized with composted human waste. I suspect if you walked into Safeway and lettuce was labeled, this lettuce was fertilized with composted human waste, that the organic market locally would skyrocket. That most people are not aware that your vegetables are fertilized with organic human waste. Now it is organic, it has been broken down. But I think that should be something I'm actually kind of curious, like I would like to know. I suspect I highly suggest that's one of those bills that that would really help local farmers. That would be something that then you could say and advertise. I don't use or human waste on my food. So It's a little thing, but it could be a game changer for local organic farmers. And we see it's a huge part of our economy, what's happened in Sequim, the Sequim Valley, some of the products we're known for. Also in Sequim, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we're the #1 producer for cauliflower seeds in the Sequim Valley. I believe there's a huge cauliflower seed market out of Sequim. So we already
Thank
have
you,
a thriving
Representative.
product.
Time's up. Ms. Wilkie?
I can get behind that bipartisan bill, human waste free. One thing that I think would really be great, I love your vision for the organic farming, and I also would like to see water use laws are also something that sort of is prohibitory for farmers out in the Sequim area especially, and maybe out here some too. But as I've talked with port commissioners about the concept of also, if we had larger warehousing, refrigerated warehousing in the areas that are nearby our airstrips, that might help. And that is that the GMA currently limits the sizes of these buildings. So I think that if we work together with the local municipalities to try to get some of those barriers out of the way, it would be a great boon to the organic market. I agree with your vision on that matter. And not only would it bring food to the area, but it would also bring jobs to the area. It's just lovely. I really like the idea. So I don't have too much more to say on that, except that any kind of industry that we can bring to our district is going to be beneficial, and it will help business owners, it will help families, it will help industry.
Question that was submitted in writing. Ms. Wilkie, one of your main talking points is about reducing regulations. The reason we have regulations are because we can't depend on everyone doing the right thing regarding the public good or the commons. Can you tell us 3 regulations you would like to get rid of? And Mr. Chapman, can you address your thoughts on regulation? Ms. Wilkie?
Well, I agree that we do need to have some regulations, that some instances people will overreach, and we've seen that in the past. I think that we also know where we have to be careful. But just like people can overreach opportunity, they can also overreach on regulations. And I think that the resulting of how overreach has decimated the builders market out here. So I would like to see, as I've mentioned many times, I would like to see, and there's probably way more than 3 different specific regulations in the GMA that we could slice and dice to bring to right size, I should say. So that is an area that I think is ripe for the picking as far as affecting the housing market. Let's see, so yeah, I'm just gonna leave it there because there's more than 3 issues within that one law that we can address.
Representative Chapman?
One regulation that I worked on, and I'm glad it was a bipartisan bill, it was, so we were gonna require, and for people in Jefferson County and people at the wooden boat industry to our economy, and what the state had passed before I got to the legislature was banning of copper paint on wooden boats by, and it's supposed to take effect this year. As Bob, the supply shop down at the marina, came to me and said, yeah, the problem is there's no product to protect our wooden boats. Copper paint is still the only product that's available. So I went to the Department of Ecology, and they admitted that California looked at a couple of products, but they were actually worse for the environment than copper paint. So we put together a bill that actually exempts wooden boats from the copper paint ban while we look and wait for industry, the folks that make this stuff, to come up with a better product. So that was a regulation that would have really hurt our wooden boat industry, not only in the Northwest, and there was no better alternative. With regards to Growth Management Act, I will say I certainly served under, worked with that in 16 years as a county commissioner, and people want to criticize kind of where with growth management, but the alternative would have been the state legislature, local communities, how to plan for their future, where growth management required planning commissions of volunteers and elected bodies like city councils and boards of commissioners to make those decisions. Often Steve and I were there, and obviously Commissioner McIntyre were there in front of groups like this. So when you say you want to do it with Growth Management Act, what I hear is you want a top-down approach from the state of Washington. I like the Growth Management Act because I like the fact that as a county commissioner, I was held accountable by groups just like this for the decisions we made for the good of Clallam County, and I believe your county commissioners also are held accountable by voters just like you for the decisions they make versus a top-down approach from state government, which I have been as a state legislator because I'm very deferential to local government.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Linda Abbott Grove from Fort Townsend. I was just in an effort to get to know you better. I was just wondering what sources you access for information. What are you currently reading? What have you read recently? Can you tell us that?
Yeah, I read a lot. I read a lot of newspaper. I read both Paul Krugman and I read Pat Buchanan. And they both are run obviously in the Peninsula Daily News on a regular basis. Currently, I'm reading two really fascinating books. One is called Senator Mansfield. And for people who remember, Senator Mansfield was the longest serving majority leader in the Senate's history as a Democrat from Montana. And he served from the 50s and through the Vietnam War conflict. And it's a very fascinating book of someone who had to work in a bipartisan way and lead the nation through a period, both in and really the difficulties he had in dealing with President Johnson, who had been his mentor when President Johnson was the majority leader before he handpicked Mike was Montana. He was an old Butte farmer, copper miner, I'm sorry. And in the copper mines, they say tapper light boys. And he had a saying in the Senate when things got a little prison, he'd say tapper light boys. And that's a philosophy that I've tried to bring to the legislature is tapper light. Let's work together. We can do this. And proud to say the legislature works really, really well together. And the lessons I've learned from that book are helping me. Another book that I usually read two books at one time. So I'm reading a book called Crashed. And it's a history of how did our economy collapse in 2008. And it goes all the way back to the Nixon decision. Just started off with the Nixon decision to go off the gold standard, and kind of it looks like it's 800 pages, so I'm plowing my way through. But it looks like it'll take us right up and through our economy collapsing in 2008. I think that's important because of the fact that as someone who's a representative, I should be aware of economic cycles and help budget for those cycles. But I certainly read a number of columnists across the spectrum. I don't watch cable news. I'm done with cable news. I'm done with people yelling at each other. I read and study, and I really enjoy reading. So,
Ms. Wilkie.
I haven't had much time for cable news lately either. Mostly the things that I'm reading are issues specific. A lot of news articles from various different sources across the country and locally. So, people send me information and I read it and I look up information that's specific to issues that are going on in our district. I haven't had much time to read a book lately. This has been a huge learning opportunity for me to run for office here and learning about all the various different issues that are important to our communities all across our district has taken up a lot of my time. So I look forward to being able to fall back and read some books after this election is over, and I guess that's where we're at.
All right, thank you. That's the time period we have for questions. We are going to ask each candidate to give a 3-minute closing statement. If you did not get a chance to ask your question, please line up at the mic first for our next round. So we're going to start in alphabetical order with you, Representative Chapman. 3 minutes, please.
So a couple of highlights. We had a 60-day session earlier this year. We balanced the budget. We fully complied with the McCleary decision. We cut your property taxes. And this year we're going to put over $1 billion more into the state rainy day fund, fully complying with the constitutional requirements, thanks. And so we were able to cut your property taxes, finish the days. A couple of highlights that we also did on your behalf. For the first time since 1943 on a bipartisan vote, we were able to update the Equal Pay Act for women. For the first time since 1943, on a bipartisan vote, we updated the equal pay law in Washington State for women. We had fallen behind Tennessee and Utah. That was an embarrassment, and that was a really good bipartisan bill. In fact, we had 18 partisan votes in Olympia in a short session. True enough. How many people think we had 100 bipartisan votes? Yeah, you're right. We did not have 100 bipartisan votes. In a short session, in the House floor, fully documented, we had 556 bipartisan votes to 18 partisan votes.
Wow.
And in fact, I sponsored 15 pieces of legislation. Prime sponsored 15 pieces of legislation. 8 became law, all had solid bipartisan support. What you learn in Olympia is like you learn what you learn in third grade, and what we learn on a high school basketball team. You got to get along to move good policy forward. Our leadership will move Republican bills forward if they're good. Our leadership will work with the Republican leaders. We're not a purely partisan body. 56 bipartisan votes in a short session. That's not 556 laws. There's a lot of procedural votes, but that is 556 documented to 18 purely partisan votes. That's a government, unlike Washington, D.C., that's working together. I'm fully embrace bipartisanship. Like I said, I prime sponsored 15 pieces of legislation, and they all had bipartisan support. 8 became law, and some of them are really significant pieces of law. So I'm really proud of that record. It's something I fundamentally believe in. I want to be part of a legislature that works for you. I want to be part of a legislature that works for this district. I want to be part of a legislature that walks across the aisle. I watched Representative Theringer late at night as we put a budget, 2 o'clock in the morning, continually walk across to the Republican side to say, what can we do to pass this capital budget, as we had a stalemate right before we left session, because he knew that $47 million we were going to invest in the 24th legislative district, and that $69 million we were going to invest in the 19th legislative district just to the south of us, $110 million investment. He was not willing to leave the Capitol. None of us were willing to leave. Bipartisan works, and we finally did get to a bipartisan vote on a lot of issues. 556, if there's one number I want you to remember, 556 bipartisan votes to 18. I'll put that track record up. It's a track record I had as a county commissioner, and I'd love to continue that work for the next 2 years. Thank you very much.
Ms. Wilkie?
Well, it is my honor to run for this seat, and I hope that you will consider my candidacy. I have a lot of experience in the private sector that puts me in a position to be able to understand many of these issues. And probably you've all heard before of the various different positions that I've held and my work with owning my own businesses and working in various different industries, inclusion in boat building and yacht manufacturing, and in the housing industry through mortgage and investment real estate. So I am conversant in those areas, and that brings a unique quality to the picture. I am also willing to tile and make deals, consider other people's points of view. I'm very much interested in knowing what goes on with the people in our district, and I, at the risk of sounding negative, I will say one of the complaints that I received as I was out in the district was that they don't see our representatives enough. So I guess if I could pass that on in the instance that I don't win, try and get out a little more there. Maybe that would help. I agree with the idea of the bipartisan issues. The 8 bills that Mike was able to pass, I think that it's worth mentioning that a lot of these issues are I guess in a sense you could say no-brainers. Whether or not we should have extended the length of buses to include bike racks, that seems like a pretty easy issue. And the anti-fouling paint issue, broadcasting during an emergency and setting up areas for broadcasters, I think that's pretty obvious, and we can all agree these kinds of things are bipartisan, and they need to be dealt with. There are a lot of issues too that were not necessarily 100% bipartisan. So even if you have one person or 2 or 4 Republicans against the issue, you can still say that it's bipartisan. It's important that we do work together to come up with laws that will help our community. The biggest things that I see that we need help with is economic, because we do have a history of falling GDP and increased unemployment in our area. things may be getting a little better right now, and that could be just a reflection of the better economics in our country. So I think it's about time that the area that we are living in, which is really one of the most beautiful in the world, begins to see an economic revival. I'm sorry to see how much people tend to struggle in this area.
Can we give both our candidates a round of applause, please? Thank you both so much. Thank you for running for office. We know it's a lot of work. We're going to take a 5-minute recess, maybe 7. There are treats in the back. Please do note the donation bucket if you're able to. And please join us in about 5 minutes. We'll call you back for position 2.
Thank you.
Actually, the